Biggest advice, don't do what I did. My name is Richard Morby, or Handpan and Life on socials. I started playing the handpan about 1 year ago, and I went from beginner to creator to collector to builder in just 24 months. In this video, I offer my personal advice on how to get started, buy and choose your first handpan. Before we get into that, let me just give you a short introduction into how I first fell in love with the handpan. I first heard a handpan on YouTube, I think it was about 10 years ago, and you've probably seen the video too. It was the viral video by Hang Massive in the park with their hangs, the original hangs. I looked into handpans back then, but they seemed very expensive, and I mean, they still are expensive, but it just wasn't within my budget at the time, and it didn't feel in my heart like it was the right time to kind of embark on that journey at that moment in time. I slept on the idea, and many years passed. I focused on my other projects, some of which you can see on my YouTube channel, like my G-Wiz and my solar tricycle. I've done some crazy things over the years, just following my passions, following my interests. And then those 2 years that we just don't talk about happened. I found my life sort of turned upside down, more so emotionally than physically. I felt like I had lost control of my life path. And coming out the other side, it took me a good while to kind of find this new balance, which just didn't quite feel the same. I shrunk myself from social media during that time because having an alternative opinion could get you into trouble, censored or banned. And a lot of genuine and wholesome discussions just disappeared. Inevitably, I stopped being the change that I wanted to see in the world. I'm sure I'm not the only one that felt like reality had shifted, and navigating the new world left me feeling a little lost, well, very lost. And I felt like I needed something more than my previous hobbies and talents. I needed a new outlet, a new passion, a new career. I needed a new way to express myself. And that is when Marten showed up on my feed one day. Out of nowhere, I hadn't searched handpan for a very long time. And it just surprised me. I suddenly seen how these instruments had evolved. Suddenly we had these mutant notes, and we had notes underneath the handpan. Some of them had lots of notes underneath the handpan. And that fascinated me. I researched any artist that came up on the search, such as Change of Colours and Konstantin Rosler. I was so inspired by some of these artists early on. I remember seeing Warren Shanti, I remember seeing so many artists. And I could just keep going on naming them, but it was so inspiring seeing how these mutant notes opened up a whole new way of expressing yourself. And that called to me. I found the evolution of handpans just fascinating. And the different materials, like ember steel. Oh, I do love ember steel. It's got such a beautiful and wonderful depth to it. My heart knew this was it. It was time to start my handpan journey. Choosing your first handpan. Biggest advice, don't do what I did. My first handpan was a Meridian B2. Okay, I am telling porkies. We don't want to talk about my first handpan. All right, let's talk about it. I fell into the same trap as many people do when we first start looking into handpans. I was looking at all these reputable makers of handpans over £1,000. And then I go onto Amazon and I see some for as little as £200. That's too good to be true, right? right? It turns out that there is no such thing as a cheap handpan. Cheaper handpans often cut corners and they skip certain steps, like in the tuning process, or they use inferior metals and materials. So you won't achieve the same sound as you would from a properly tuned handpan. Okay, so let's get a little bit nerdy. So on a handpan, you have three notes tuned onto each axis. You have the fundamental, you have the octave, and you have the fifth. So during the tuning process, handpans often go through rigorous testing. Once they've been shaped and once the notes have been developed and bordered, and maybe after one round of tuning, they'll then put them into a kiln, or they'll get a flamethrower, flame thingy, and they'll heat them up to over 400 degrees, let them cool down, put them through another round of tuning, and they'll keep doing that for about 2 or 3 times, or even more, until the tuning is stable. And that produces a handpan that should stay in tune for your whole life, as long as you take good care of it and don't put it in sunlight or drop it. So in the end, I bought a cheap Amazon handpan on Facebook at a higher price than what they sold for on Amazon itself. I mean, at the time, I didn't know it was an Amazon handpan. Do not do what I did. Please, please do not do what I did. Anyway, I went to Meridian Handpans and I took this Amazon handpan down there and I showed Duncan, and in sort of similar words, Duncan said, "I can't tune this. It looks like a handpan, but it's not a handpan." And he kind of gave me a little description of what was wrong with it, and then brought one of his out and played it and showed me. And there was just a huge difference. So in the end, I went home with an untuned Amazon handpan, and I took home my B2 Celtic Meridian, which was my very first real handpan. And now a year later, I own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got a 6th one coming this month, not to mention the 2 teacher training handpans that I was gifted from Yatal for completing the Marten teacher training. My collection is growing, and I'm going to end up with more teaching pans because in the future I'm going to be holding group sort of retreat workshops, so watch this space. When you are choosing your first handpan, I think there are 3 important things to consider. Number 1, have you played an instrument before? If you have played an instrument before, then you probably already have the musical knowledge and the skills to pick up a handpan. And once you learn to touch the tone fields, then it might be relatively easy for you to apply your own melodies and your own ideas to the instrument. Number 2, do you know music theory? If you already know music theory, then you already have a big head start. That will give you some freedom in not having to stick to the D chord, which most beginners do. It would give you the ability to apply your theoretical knowledge to any scale that calls to you. Number 3, your learning style may also determine what sort of scale you start with when you first play the handpan. Because if you need to follow tutorials to the letter and can't deviate and can't apply that to anything else, then the D chord is probably the handpan that you want to start on, because there's hundreds of tutorials out there that you can draw from. If you have an intuitive and adaptive learning style, then you may be okay choosing any scale that calls to you, because you should, in theory, be able to apply any technique, any method, any melody from any tutorial that you find, or even just someone playing the handpan online, and just apply that and transpose it to the scale that you buy. What type of style am I? I would say a very backwards one. I find it easier to learn the complicated things first, such as when I first started playing, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. I learned the bending. I found it so cool that people could do harmonics. I learned to do for that cool wavy effect. I'm a very intuitive player, I would say. And so what I like to do is to figure out a few cool things that I like, and then I will make my own riffs around those techniques. And because of my piano background, even though I had the B2 Celting and it sounded beautiful, I was still craving the Iamara with its many notes. I didn't settle at all until I bought my first Iamara 20. The Iamara 20 was on Mr. Pan's stainless steel, so it sounded amazing, but for me, I wanted it to sound like a Yasa. I wanted the ember steel. So eventually I swapped it out, sold it, and I bought my Iamara 21 from Acero Harmonics. And yes, I did want that extra B5. Choosing a scale. Listen, listen, listen. Listen to lots of YouTube videos. There is so many out there from all the different kinds of scales that you can find on a handpan. Eventually you will find that scale that just speaks to your heart. Even if you're a total beginner and you're going to start on the D chord anyway, it will hopefully give you some inspiration and kind of set that internal higher goal that eventually you're going to reach something like the dreamy D-Aegean. Bear in mind that even the most competent musicians may still struggle with scales like the D-Aegean, because the notes are just laid out in a very unique way that takes some getting used to. Like it took me about 3 weeks. Well, I learned how to do some things in a week, but it took me about 3 weeks to finally be comfortable playing the D-Aegean. The Iamara has a very straightforward layout. Like even a beginner, if you want more notes, the Iamara 20 is still a good choice because you can play it so intuitively, everything just goes together. So you'll be able to make music even if you don't completely understand what you're doing. Or the F sharp low pygmy. The fascinating thing is that the F sharp low pygmy is in exactly the same scale as the D-Aegean. So you can play those things together, which is what you see quite often on YouTube. But the F sharp low pygmy has a much more nicer intuitive layout. You can do melodies on it a little bit easier. However, the harmonic axes is different. So the chords are all over the place versus Amaras and chords. So just keep that in mind if you do really like the F sharp low pygmy. And there's not really any tutorials out for the moment on that. I can probably help you with it, and I'm sure other handpan teachers can too. So you're a beginner, and just like me, you were very uninspired by the D chord scale. And although it's not a bad scale, it just didn't speak to your heart. There is some good news here, because you could actually get a chord, but it would be, say, an F chord, an F sharp chord, an E chord, and it's still in the same layout as the D chord, but it will have a completely different tone and feel because of the different scales. So if you're not that inspired by a D curd, but you see an Iamara on YouTube and you think, oh wow, that looks amazing, but I'm not ready to take on that many notes and all the notes underneath, you could have an E curd made, which means that you could follow all the different notes and tutorials for a D curd, like for like, and you could practice on that handpan scale whilst using the hundreds of tutorial videos out there. I must admit the D curd was one of the last scales I actually obtained because it wasn't something that I wanted to play myself, but since I enrolled this year and completed it, the Marten method affiliate teacher training. So I'm now listed on the teacher training map for the Marten website. It is an amazing experience after just playing the handpan for 1 year. But I got my D curd just so that I could do that training and be able to teach people some of the basic things. The D curd has grown on me since I've started playing it, but my favourite scales will always be things like the Iamara. I do love a good deep bassy handpan, which is what we have down here. This was actually my third handpan, third real handpan, not including the Amazon handpan. I don't count that. What I really love the idea of, and the reason why I ended up buying a E2 Voyager from Panstream, is that it pairs so nicely with the higher mutants. So you could be doing a groove. If you look at some of my previous YouTube videos from Into the Wild earlier this year, I met an amazing guy who had an F3 Pygmy from Meridian. So we played these together, this deep bass and his F3, and it just went together so beautifully. So eventually my goal will be to have a deep pan that will go with all my scales so that I can just get together with people and we'll jam with the deep and the high. Okay, so now you know what scale you want. The next question is, where do I buy it from? Unfortunately, like many expensive products, there is a big scam market, like cheap fake Amazon handpans sold on Facebook Marketplace. So it is very important to do your own research and find reputable makers that can produce the handpan with the quality that you desire. Okay, so I know not to fall for Temu or Amazon handpans. Now what? So the general rule of thumb is that it's always best to look for a handpan maker in your own country, preferably within easy reach, so that if any eventuality happens, such as it needs a retune, or you drop it when it needs repairs, or you leave it in sunlight by accident, you can always take it back to them and get it looked at. There's a few places that you can find a list of makers, but the one that I found when I first started looking into it was a website called Master the Handpan. They have a directory where they list a load of makers that you can filter through by the country. So I think that's a really good resource just to find any handpan maker. I will include a link to that specific page in my description below on the video. I should probably mention that I work very closely with a friend of mine, Chris at Acero Harmonics. Most of my handpans are actually from him. So you can already see on my YouTube the kind of quality of instruments that he produces. And the great thing is that if you mention my name, Richard Morby, or my social handle, Handpan and Life, you will get a really nice little discount on top of already amazing prices. So you could effectively get a beginner's handpan like a D curd for as little as around £800. So that's a fantastic offer. So if you're in the UK, definitely jump on that, but he does also post abroad as well. I will also provide a link directly to his contact details in the description below. Once you've decided that you've found a potential handpan maker, there is 3 things to consider. So number 1 is the handpan material. Number 2 is tuning and sound. Number 3 is budget. So if you've been listening to some of the most popular YouTube videos with handpans, you have likely been listening to instruments from Ayasa. So Ayasa produces most of their instruments on Ember steel, and they are one of the most reputable brands and makers out there. And then you'll look at their website and you'll think, oh my God, do I want to pay 4,000 euros for a handpan? But the good news is that they do sell their shells, the Ember steel. And a lot of handpan makers these days use Ember steel. This is Ember steel, this is Ember steel, this is Ember steel, this is Ember steel. The other common materials used are stainless and nitrided. So Ember is a form of stainless, but general like kind of stainless steel handpans like the Yatou. So this is a Yatou F-sharp low 21. I find that Ember steel has a really nice resonance and deep, warm tone. I find that stainless is normally a bit brighter. And then you've got nitrided. So I don't have a nitrided instrument here to show you that they are kind of like my least favorite material. But that's because I come from a piano background. Now, if you come from a percussionist background, you might really like nitrided because it has a shorter resonance, but it has more of a percussive element. So you can do more grooves and dance around on it like you would do on a drum kit. My favorite, you already know, is Ember steel. And that's why I really love my handpans from Chris at Acero, because they are very, very, very affordable, but they're made on Ayasa Ember steel. Amazing. So I would encourage you to try and find different videos of the scale that you like, but on different handpan materials, because that will also give you an idea of, do I like this scale on this particular material, or do I want it on nitrided? It's all like a personal taste and a personal flavor. But it also offers a nice contrast to show you how the scale can change depending on what material it is made on. So when it comes to tuning, this is another, we could go into depth about this, but tuning is another factor to consider when you are looking at having a handpan made. Look at the maker that you're interested in, see some of their previous examples, because every maker's method of tuning is kind of like their own signature that gets immortalized into the tone field of the handpan. And so you hear that resonance and you hear that feel. And every maker is different. Every maker's ear is different. So how they tune will vary. So it's always good to listen to them and see, okay, do I like this style of tuning? Do I like that style of tuning? And that's another thing to take into consideration when you are thinking of ordering your scale. So you finally decided on what scale you like. You've decided on the material that you want it built on. You've decided on the maker that you want to buy it from. And then you open your wallet and purse, you tip it upside down, and you just get a bunch of receipts fall to the ground. Hands up if you were a culprit of just storing old receipts in your wallet instead of notes. Handpans can be very expensive, but with enough research and shopping around, you might be able to find a handpan maker within your budget, within the quality that you're happy with. So as long as their brand is known and you can see the quality of the instruments that they produce, it's time to decide whether you can fit it into your budget at this moment in time, and decide if it is the right time to invest in a sound sculpture that could very well change your life. And if you do not have the budget, PayPal credit exists for a reason. Yes, I have bought 2 of my handpans like this. And if you decide that you might have the skills and the physical prowess, I took it a step further. Last year, when I was only 2 months into playing the handpan, I decided I want to learn to build them too. As you can probably tell by now, I don't do anything by half measure. So not only did I buy my first handpans, I bought all the equipment to learn how to build them myself. I spent the better part of last winter learning how to shape handpans and make the tone fields and all of these kind of things. And that paid off, because this winter I have been in the workshop with Chris at Acero Harmonics, and I've started helping him with a lot of the manual labour and learning firsthand from a maker how to build them. So it's very, 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 very exciting times. In the future, I would really, really, really love to experiment with variations of my own scales. So watch this space. Oh, and before I forget, a quick note on frequencies. Now, you might hear a lot of people go on about the 432 Hertz as a frequency to purchase and play for healing and meditation. Now, that's all well and good, but you've got to consider that a lot of instruments today, in fact, most of them, are tuned in 440 Hertz. So if you ever plan to play with anyone, if you want to incorporate other instruments into your playing, like make tracks with other instruments and make your own music, and if you want the best chance to resell your instrument, if you ever decide that, okay, I've moved on from the handpan, it's time to invest in something else, 440 Hertz is what you should be buying. Now, the only time that I would consider 432 Hertz is if your heart is set on it, you're not worried about trying to resell it at a good price in the future, and you don't plan to jam with anyone else. So if you're a solo player and you're only going to use it for your own gain and your own private pleasure, then 432 Hertz could be an option. But at the end of the day, the choice is entirely up to you. So in March this year, I won my 4th handpan. So this was number 4 in my collection. This is the F sharp low pygmy. Such a beautiful, dreamy scale. One of the things I did join when I first started playing the handpan was the Marten method fundamental course. Now, I looked at various courses online. There was Master the Handpan, and I did try the free trial version of that, and the community is amazing. The forums are great. During that trial period, I looked up all the different artists that had put in their tutorial videos, and the one that stood out to me the most was Marten, because he has a very intuitive approach to learning. And so I joined the Handpan Fundamentals course because for 2 reasons. One was that it was a one-off payment, and it was a lifetime payment. And all the other features that they offered in that course was rather amazing. They'll do live calls once a month. They'll run monthly challenges once a month. And in those monthly challenges, you always had the chance to win a handpan. Like, he's always giving away handpans. It's really amazing. And it got to the anniversary challenge for the fundamental course, and they were giving away, on top of the normal handpans, they were giving away a D-Curd 13, an EMARA 20, an F-sharp Pygmy 21. And it was a really funny story, actually, because I really, 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 really wanted an F-sharp low pygmy. And just before the anniversary challenge, I'd sold my EMARA 20, and I was having my Ember Steel one made by Chris. And some of the money that I made from that, I was using to fund the Marten teacher training course. At this point, I was fully invested. So if I was going to spend my life savings on handpans, I should really try to make it a career, right? If you do like the idea of the Marten method fundamental course and the chance to win a handpan every month, before you even think about signing up, remember to quote my name, Richard10, on checkout, and you will get a nice little discount going into the course. Now, I will provide another link below in my description with my affiliate connection on there. So if you have been thinking about learning the handpan, you don't want to pay for one-to-one lessons, but you do like the idea of a lifetime course with a lot of potential to kind of challenge yourself on the monthly challenges and all that kind of stuff, remember to use this code because it will give you a little bit of money off and just help you there on your budget. I just can't even believe how this happened. So when it came to the anniversary challenge, my number was something like 21 and Esme's was 22 or something like that. So Esme, you've probably seen her on socials. She's a previous Marten affiliate teacher who did the first cohort. She's actually managed to start teaching full time now, I think, as a handpan teacher, which is really amazing. But during this challenge, the first raffle was drawn for the anniversary challenge. It landed on Esme. And bear in mind that we're right next to each other on the ticket numbers. And she won the D-Curd 13. They drew it again and it landed on my number. And I won an EMR 20. The pan that I'd just sold in the same material, kind of the same manufacturer. It was hilarious. So at the time I thought, okay, that's fair. I'll have the EMR 20, I'll keep it. I could sell it, I could keep it. And then I'll have a jamming instrument when I get the EMR made from Chris. And then they roll again and I wasn't paying attention. And then suddenly I look at the screen and Esme has won the F-sharp 21. So she won 2 handpans in that raffle. But it turned out that she really, 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 really wanted the EMR 20 and I really, 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 really wanted the F-sharp 21. So on the call, I just kind of interjected. And I was like, do you want to swap? And so we ended up swapping handpans that we'd won and she got her dream handpan and I got my dream handpan. It was just crazy. It was like the fates had aligned and it was time for me to win this beautiful instrument. So finally you have your handpan, you take it out the box, you stare at this shiny new UFO-like work of art and you're completely mesmerized by it. And then you try to do this. And it makes no sound. And then you look at YouTube and you see people dancing their finger over it effortlessly. And it just seems completely natural. You try to play again and you hear muffled sounds. You stare at your pan, thinking, is it broken? Am I broken? Now what? Something I teach to my students, if they've never played a handpan before or an instrument, is first touch. It's a very, very, very crucial element when you first start playing, and it's important to get this right because once you have your first touch, learning all the other things will just kind of come a lot more naturally. Touch for a handpan is everything. Well, maybe not everything, but it's a big part. A very big part. So imagine that you hover your finger over a candle flame. What happens? The moment that you feel the heat, you pull away very quickly. Unless, of course, you don't feel pain at all. But the point is, it is a good visualization on how to touch the notes on a handpan. These round flat areas are the tone fields. So you might not be getting a sound because you might be hitting in the interstitial. So where you want to be aiming for is this little ridge where the dimple is. Now you can hit anywhere around this flat part and you'll make a sound. The best sound comes from this ridge. Really what you want is your hand in relaxed state. So when you do tap it, you're going back to relaxed state, so it's going beyond and coming back, and that just helps with that flick. You just keep practicing, going up the scale, and this is going to really help you because if you can ascend and descend the scale without even thinking about it, when you start learning all the other parts of the handpan and the grooves and techniques and all of that kind of stuff, it's going to be a lot more easier and simpler if you've already built this into your muscle memory. If you would like to learn a little bit more about the handpan and how to play, and you have got your first handpan, please get in touch because I do offer one-to-one lessons. I am also going to start expanding into retreats. If you're in the UK, I might start hosting some retreats once I have more teaching pans together. So watch this space. It's going to be exciting times. I do plan to make some more tutorial videos on this channel in the future. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, save. In the future, I will start producing more content along the lines of tutorials and other useful tips and tricks. So stay tuned.